Let's talk about iterable style datasets now. Again, its purpose is to return a single instance of data. The difference from a mapped dataset is that it can be directly used as an iterator. So it can be used inside a for loop. And there is no indexing of the data because there's no notion of going back in the data. Like we talked about earlier, with indexing, you can go back to to a previously seen example, but here you cannot. And these are often infinite iterators, like some of the examples that we saw earlier, which were Kafka streams or Kinesis streams. Let's now take a look at the implementation of the iterable dataset. So we go back to the Torch GitHub repo, and we are in the same file, dataset.py. And iterable style dataset is defined just right here. And you can see that it is actually implementing the dataset interface. The difference being that here we have to implement the iter, the dunder iter method, which makes this an iterator. And right now it's not implemented because it's left for the child class to implement. And they have again implemented the plus operator with a chain dataset, which we'll see in just a moment. And of course, the get item method is still defined because it's on the dataset interface, but it's just going to throw a not implemented error. As before, let's implement our own toy iterable style dataset. So we'll need to import iterable dataset first. And the idea is that this is going to be very similar to the map style dataset we implemented, except it's going to be an infinite dataset, but it's going to have the same n features. Of course, there's no point of having any number of rows. Now let's implement the iter method. What we want it to do is, as before, every time it's called, it should yield a tuple of one row of x and y, which is either 0 or 1. So let's see how to make that happen. So start is the value that the row should start with, and this is an infinite iterator. So we want n elements in x starting with start. And again, as before, we want y to be choice between 0 and 1 with the same probabilities as before, which is 0.7 and 0.3. Now we yield this tuple, increment start, so the next row can start with the right value, and that completes our implementation of this iterable dataset. Now let's iterate through this iterable dataset to make sure that everything works. And because this is an infinite dataset, we need to have a way of breaking out of the loop, which is where I'm going to use the counter variable. So here I'm printing out the tuple, and if counter is more than 5, then we break out of the loop. Oh, and n is not default, so let's specify n. And everything seems to be working just fine.